Hi everyone, it's Sam from Made by Ireland. I'm really excited today to show you the newest pattern by Sewfisticated Craft Designs, the Luna. So the Luna comes in two sizes. We have the Luna Petite as well as the Luna Regular. One of the coolest things for me about the Luna is the versatility of it, which I guess I say with a lot of sophisticated craft design patterns. So first of all, I'll show you exactly what I mean by it. So this is the Luna Regular. As you can see, it's got absolutely beautiful curves on the top, on the bottom. It's got that beautiful crescent shape. Now, here's where the fun part comes in. How do you wear the Luna? So that completely depends on the strap that you choose. So right now, I've got this set up as a beautiful crossbody bag, right? Now, if I went for a shorter strap, this then becomes a crossbody sling. Just like that. Now, if I go for an even shorter strap, this is a handbag. Now, the exact same can be done with the Petite as well. Depending on your strap, how you wear it, it becomes a different bag. So it gives you a lot of versatility in terms of what you want to do with the bag. Now, once again, Jassy has given us a pattern that can be made using all sorts of different materials. This one is made with faux leather vinyl on the exterior completely. This one I've used water-resistant canvas as well as faux leather. You can also use cotton woven, canvas, pretty much any type of material that you would use for bag making, you can use for this pattern, as long as you interface it and stabilize it correctly. So that's one of the coolest things for me about this bag, is the versatility. Now, I love how it looks, how it feels. This bag has the end user in mind. It's got lots of compartments, exactly what you need. Now, let's go into a quicker look. So this is the regular. So we have your front. On the back, you do have a back zipper pocket. When we go into the inside of the bag, you have a slip pocket on one side, and on the other side, you have a zipper pocket. I've also added a second slip pocket, and I'll show you how to do that as well in this tutorial. Now, with the Petite, you have your front and your back. Your main compartment's accessed by a zipper. When you're inside, you then have a slip pocket on either side. There we go. As you can see, it's quite spacious on the inside. Now, this pattern has been ranked as advanced beginner to intermediate. So if you are a beginner, can you make this bag? That's probably the question that will get asked the most. I believe so, yes. So one of the, I think it's the third pattern I ever made, was a Sewfisticated Craft Designs pattern that was also ranked as intermediate. And I made it without any problems. And the reason that I could do it, to me anyway, came exactly down to Jassy's pattern writing skills. So she goes through everything in great detail, which makes it a lot easier to follow. And she also teaches you how to sew things as she's writing those instructions. So it makes it nice and easy to follow. Why is this ranked intermediate? Just in case you wanted to delve into it and not just go by some strange word, right? So the reason it's ranked intermediate is because, first of all, there is optional piping. So as you can see, this is piping. So I've done piping on this bag, but I've not done piping on this one. So the piping is completely optional. It does add a little bit of pizzazz to the bag if you'd like to, but without it, it still looks absolutely stunning. The second thing is, of course, the curves. There is curves everywhere. So obviously with curves, it can be a little bit tricky, but a beginner can definitely do it. Take your time, I'll talk you through it, and we'll get through it step by step. Now, the last thing is that it is finished off with binding, as you can see on the inside there. So these two rows are binding. So binding can be tricky for some. I will also talk you through that, and we'll go through that all step by step together. So don't worry, we've got this. Okay, so enough of me talking. Let's get on to the tutorial now. This tutorial will be sectioned into different chapters, so feel free to skip ahead if you don't want to watch the whole video. Skip to the chapter that you need. You won't be missing anything. Everything will be chapter specific. So let's get into it. I'm super excited, you guys. Okay, so I just want to talk about material choices for this pattern. So this pattern has been written so that you are able to use any material of your choosing. So as I've said before, with this one here, I've got a waterproof canvas front and back panel, vinyl base gusset, and with this one I have gone for all vinyl. So neither of these have been interfaced, but if you are using a cotton woven or a stretch fabric, make sure you interface beforehand. In terms of what I'll be doing in this tutorial, I will be making both the petite and the regular size. I won't be showing both at the same time, just where it differs. But with my petite, I am going with an all faux leather exterior. And with my regular, I am using a 420D waterproof canvas for my exterior, as well as a vinyl for the base. So just to give you an idea, in terms of piping, I am going to do piping for my petite. So this is a pre-made piping tape. I'm cheating a little bit. So this is piping tape that I've bought that's already been made, so I don't have to make my own piping tape, but I will do a video later down the track to show you how to make your own piping as well if anyone is interested. With our binding, my binding of choice is fold over elastic. I also have a more detailed video showing how I use fold over elastic with all my tips and tricks, so feel free to check that out, but otherwise I'll be using fold over elastic for my binding. You can obviously also make your own binding tape. You can use pre-bought double fold over elastic. I think that's what it's called. You can use binding tape, so the option is completely yours as to how you want to bind. So I want to talk a little bit about lining fabric. So for me, I always use waterproof material for lining. So this is what I tend to use. So this is Sewfisticated Twill from Sewfisticated Supplies. So I am using this for all of my linings. It is completely waterproof. It's thin, so it's domestic friendly, and it's got really good structure even though it is thin. For my pockets, I am using a Vibrant Voo from also Sewfisticated Supplies. It has really nice hand feel, but again, it is waterproof and it's nice and thin. So once again, domestic machine friendly. Now with our Stabiliser, because that's a big thing. So Stabiliser, do you need it? The option for Stabiliser on the front and back panel is up to you. So on this one, for my petite, I didn't use Stabiliser on my front and back panel. The reason being is this vinyl that I've used, it's actually quite, got quite a bit of weight to it. So this is it here, an offcut of it. As you can see, it holds itself quite well. So because of that and the size of the petite, I've decided not to use Stabiliser, and it obviously holds up well. But with the make that I'm doing on this one, I will be using Stabiliser because this is obviously a little bit floppier. It doesn't have quite as much structure as that one. So the pattern calls for heavy Stabiliser. So what I use is Sewfisticated foam from, again, Sewfisticated Supplies. So this is the heavy. So I'm going to be using Sewfisticated foam heavy for both front, back, and the base gusset for both of my bags. So what this is, it is an adhesive material, so you just stick it on, don't need to heat it, and it is done. Now if you do not have Sewfisticated foam, you can also use Decaville heavy or something like Peltex, something that's heavy, that's got a lot of structure to it, especially for your base and for your regular size if you are using anything that is that doesn't have structure to it, because you want a bit of structure on this bag so that it maintains its beautiful crescent shape. Go. So we'll keep moving on and I'll show you the cut list next. Okay, so let's go through the cut list for the petite and everything that we're going to need. So first of all, we have our front and back panel. So we have one piece for the front, one for the back, and two linings, one for the front, one for the back, and two pieces of Stabiliser, one for the front, one for the back. So that is, of course, when you look at your bag, your front, and your back. And the same for the inside. It's obviously the front and the back. Now after that we have our zipper gusset pieces. So we have 2 exterior ones, 2 lining pieces, and of course your zipper tape and zipper pull. So when we look at the bag, it's this one at the top is your zipper gusset. So that's your exterior, your zipper, and your lining. Moving on, we then have our base gusset. So this is, you have 1 piece of the external for the base gusset, 1 piece of lining for the base gusset, as well as stabilizer for the base gusset. So that is this piece that goes all the way from the side down the bottom on your bag. Moving on, we then have your slip pocket. So here's your slip pocket. So the slip pocket, it says to cut 4. So what I like to do is, if I'm using a feature fabric, I cut 2 in my feature fabric and 2 in my lining fabric. And the reason being, when you look at the slip pocket on the inside, open that bag up. Here's your slip pocket. So I have my fancy feature fabric on the front, and then normally on the inside, I will then have a lining fabric, just so I'm not wasting all of my feature fabric on something that you may not see. Now, after that, we then have our D-ring tab. So this is my D-ring tab here. So that is this piece right here. So it's quite prominent in between your base gusset and your zipper gusset. So make sure you choose accordingly. We then need 2 D-rings. So for the Petite, we are using 3/4 inch D-rings. I do recommend sticking to the 3/4 if not going smaller, because the bigger the D-ring is, the harder it is to sew when you get to this section here. So try to stick with 3/4 or smaller. Now I'm just going to show you guys my strap option as well. So this is going to be a shoulder carry handbag. So I'm doing a contrasting strap there. So that's just my strap piece, as well as obviously these swivel hooks to attach the strap. So that's all of the fabric pieces. Now after that, we also have optional piping for this pattern. So this is my piping that I will be using. And we also have, of course, our binding material. So that's everything for the petite size. Okay, so here we are with our all cut pattern pieces for the regular. So we'll quickly go through it. So first of all, we have the front and back panels. So I am using a panel cut for the front exterior. So we have our front and our back for the exterior, our front and our back for the lining, and then the stabilizer for front and back as well. So these are obviously your front of the bag as well as the back of the bag. Moving on to the zipper gusset. So your zipper gusset is this section here on the top. So we have our obviously zipper tape with zipper pull, and then we have 2 pieces of your zipper gusset which goes on either side of the zipper, and 2 pieces of the lining which obviously is on the underneath there. After that, we have our base gusset. So this is my base gusset piece over here. So that is this whole section here. So that whole bit is your base gusset. So here we have, bring that over here a little bit more. So we have our exterior base gusset, our lining for the base gusset, as well as our stabilizer piece for it as well. After that, we have our slip pocket. So we need 2 pieces for the slip pocket. One is the front side of the slip pocket. The other is the back side of the slip pocket. So as you can see, I've cut 2 different materials. You can use the one. I choose to save my feature fabrics. So just to give you an idea. So feature fabric on the front and the lining fabric on the inside, since you can't really see it anyway. So that's what I've done there for the slip pocket. And then for the zipper pocket, this pattern has 2 zipper pockets, one on the back exterior and one on the inside as well. So you will need 4 pieces of that pattern piece if you were doing both pockets, as well as 2 lots of zipper tape and 2 lots of zipper pulls. Now, moving on, we have our D-ring tab. So your D-ring is right here on the side there. So it's quite prominent, as you can see. So I do suggest making sure you choose the right color for you. It's definitely not a hidden D-ring. Now, you are able to use rivets as well if you'd like. So I will also show you how to do that. Now, you have 1-inch D-rings is what the pattern has called for. If you'd like to use a different size D-ring, I will not recommend going for a larger D-ring, because the larger the D-ring is, the harder it is to sew up this section. So 1 inch is probably the biggest I would go. You could go smaller if you'd like. That's completely personal choice. Moving on, we then obviously have our binding material and whatever we're using for a strap. So for this one, I am doing a crossbody. So I've got my crossbody seatbelt webbing and my swivel hooks and my strap adjuster. So that's everything for the regular that I will be doing. And let's move on. Okay, so this step is for the optional piping. So if you are doing piping, this is for you. So we're going to get our base gusset piece, and we are going to mark down on both ends. There's a measurement in the pattern instructions. So I've already marked it. So it's from the short edge down, marks on either side, and over on this side. So I've already marked that, and now we're going to clip our piping piece to it. So as I've said before, I'm using pre-made piping. If you're making your own piping, Jassy also has instructions on how to do that, and I will do a video about it later on. So we're going to start our piping at the first mark, but we are going to do it at so we're going to clip that in first at a 90-degree angle. So it kind of comes off the piece. There we go. And then we're going to have the piping going this way. So if you've never done piping before, the edge of the piping goes against the edge of the fabric, and your cording, which is the ropey bit, the thick rolly bit, is on the inside. So we're just going to clip that all in place from the mark on one side to the mark on the other side. Okay, now as we get to the mark here where it ends, we're doing the same thing. We're 90-degree angling it away. And then obviously trim it off. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side as well. Okay, so, okay, there we go. So that's all clipped on both sides to that mark, and making sure that they are at 90-degree angles at that line. So now I'm going to take you over to the sewing machine, and we're going to baste it down with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okay. So now we're just going to baste it down with a 1/8 seam allowance. So at the start there, if we struggle to get that angle, what I find useful is just getting a pokey stick, or a stiletto, if you want to call it by its proper name, and just use that to maneuver it out of the way. Go. And we're going to baste it. There we go, bring you in. So that's all basted there on that side, and we're just going to do the same on the other side as well. There we go. So that is all done. Double check that you are happy with your stitches and you're happy where they start and end, mainly that they start and end at the same similar spot and that this is angled away. And if you're not 100% happy, so I'm not really happy with this section because this is folding back in, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to quickly go back in, move that a little bit more. Probably didn't have to reverse stitch that. Oops. Okay. Yep, now what I'm going to do is trim off the excess piping tape as well. And that is your piping section done. So we'll move on to the next part. Next step is the D-ring. So this is our D-ring piece. So what we're going to do is we're going to mark the center points on both of the short edges. I like to mark my center points with nipping a quick little cut. Obviously, if I'm not using a ruler right now because I don't want to give away pattern measurements, but don't use cardboard, use a ruler. Draw a straight line straight down it. And then we're going to get some double-sided tape and we're going to stick right along that center. So this is a center line that we've just marked and we're sticking right down there. Go. And then we're going to fold the long edges into that center line. Finger press these edges to keep them nice and crisp and to help them stay in place. And give it a nice little press just so it holds its shape. And then we're going to take it over to the sewing machine and we're going to top stitch on both sides of that with a 1/8 seam allowance. So we're at the sewing machine, so we're going to top stitch that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay. Now what we're going to do, after we cut off all of these loose threads, we're going to fold it in half. We're just going to snip that. So just go cut that into 2. So now we have 2 pieces. And we are going to put our D-rings in that. And we're just going to baste that shut. We go, and that's our 2 D-ring pieces all done. So we're going to put those 2 aside. Okay, so we're now on to the slip pocket. So what we're going to do is we are going to get our label tag, if you are using a label tag, and we are going to place it on the side. Wherever you choose, it's up to you, but we want to do it at least 2 inches in from the edge and down a tiny little bit. And you can baste that in place if you like, or I'm just going to clip it. And then we're going to get the lining piece for the slip pocket and we're going to place it right sides together. And we're going to clip that all in place. We're then going to take this over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew this together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now for a little bit of bonus content. So I did say for the regular, it only comes with, the pattern comes with 1 slip pocket option. So I've turned my bag upside down, inside out to show you. I've done 2 slip pockets on this one. Now you can do your second slip pocket exactly like the pattern, but what will happen is your zipper will be covered by the slip pocket because the slip pocket comes up, let's see if I can fold this, a little bit higher, right? So what I've done here is I've gotten the pattern piece and I've marked a spot 3/4 inches down from the top. So you can do anywhere between 3/4 inch to, I reckon, 1 inch is probably your sweet spot. Just so you can see it's just underneath the zipper there. And you can cut your second slip pocket at that marker if you wanted 2 slip pockets on the regular size. For the petite, you don't have to worry, but for the regular, this is a bit of bonus content if you wanted to. But take us over to the sewing machine now and we'll sew this up. Okay, so we're doing this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go. And what we're now going to do is we're going to trim off the edges here just to help reduce the bulk. So make sure you don't cut your threads. We're just cutting off that corner on both sides. So what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it right side out and we are going to finger press it. So I'll just move you over here a little bit so you can still see what I'm doing. I found pushing my seam allowance to either side, especially with sophisticated twill, really helps because it helps me get that perfect line exactly where the stitch is. And there we go. And then I'm going to top stitch this down with a 1/8 seam allowance. So bring you back in. Now, as you get to your label tag, if you're using it, just remember to quickly flip it down to the side that you want it on. Go, and that is all top stitched together. Now we're going to grab one of the lining pieces. Here we go. And on the lining piece, I am going to fold it together so I can mark my center points on the top. Again, I like to cut little nooks onto it. You can also just use a pen to mark it. Just make sure it is within your seam allowance. There we go. And then I'll swing you over here so you can see better. And what I'm going to do now, also going to cut the center of the slip pocket down on the base, obviously not the top because it's nice and beautiful. You've just top stitched it. There we go. And we're going to mark the bottom center points and we're going to match them up. We're going to clip that together. Okay. Now that we've clipped the slip pocket to the lining, what we're going to do, regardless of whether you're doing the petite or the regular size, is I'm going to baste all the way around the edge so that my slip pocket is sewn onto my lining. So I'll flick you back over here. And we're just basting this. So just a 1/8 seam allowance. We're just getting this sewn on. Go. Okay, so that's all base stitched together. Now, if you are doing the petite, that's you done with your slip pocket. But if you are doing the regular, what we're going to do now, I'll slide you over here, is that marked center point. We are going to stitch a line right up there to divide the slip pocket into 2. The reason being is a slip pocket this size, it can flop about a fair bit. So you don't have to, but it is nice to sew that up so that it's divided into 2 sections and it adds a little bit more stability. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up right on my center. The way I like to do it, so you could just do one line up and then another line next to it, but I like to do it so that I sew up, come back down and around. So I am doing it about 1/8 inch in from my center point is where I have lined my stitching up to. And then I'm going to come across. So this would be roughly a 1/4 inch is where I found my sweet spot to be. There we go. So now what I have is a slip pocket that's now been divided into 2 sections, just like that. Now, if you'd like to, this is where you will go and put a rivet right down here. So the rivet will add a bit of extra strength to your slip pocket in case people are throwing things in because obviously this is just top stitching. So having a rivet there will add a little bit of strength to your stitching. So I will go do that now if you'd like to come along with me. Okay, so now for the rivet placement, just make sure, it doesn't really matter exactly where you place it, just make sure that you don't punch your top stitch. So I'm going to do it right about here, so just under my top stitch line and just in the middle of those two top stitch lines. So I'm just going to get my punch. Go, I've punched my hole. It's up to you whether you put any stabilizer on the back there. I always think it's good practice to do it. It also helps because this is obviously quite thin. I've only got 420D waterproof canvas as well as 2 layers of sophisticated twill. So by adding a bit of stabilizer to the back, I'm strengthening my rivet, but I am also adding a bit of thickness there to help with my rivet length, because you don't want too long a rivet. Okay, so I'm going to put that on there. Put the cap on. And rivet dress. There we go. And that is my slip pockets all done with the rivet. Okay, now we're up to the zipper pockets. So if you're doing the Petite, there are no zipper pockets, so skip to the next chapter. If you are doing the regular, this is for you. So I am doing 2 zipper pockets as per the pattern instructions, one for the back external piece and one for a lining piece. I'm just going to show you one set because you don't need to watch me do the exact same thing twice. It's exactly the same installation method. So I'm going to copy the zipper pocket from the pattern instructions onto the back of my pocket piece. So the easiest way is to cut that out of your pattern instructions, line it up and just draw it straight down, which I've already done. And then we're going to mark out the center points of the pocket piece, as well as of the external piece or the lining piece, whichever one you're doing. And then what we're going to do is we're going to line the pocket piece to the external back piece, right sides together, and we're going to match up the center points. So Jassy has a great tip for you here. If you have painter's tape, get a bit of painter's tape and stick that down on either side. Painter's tape will come off and shouldn't leave much residue, if any, on your fabric. I don't have painter's tape, so I just clip. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine and I am going to sew right along that top and bottom line. I am going to leave these 2 sides unstitched, so just sewing that top line and that bottom line. Okay, so now I'm just going to stitch the 2 long lines right on the line. There we go. So that's all stitched on that top line and that bottom line. So we're going to go back over to the table and we're going to cut the zipper box open. So we've just sewn that top and bottom line and we've gotten back to the sewing table. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that rectangle piece that we cut out from the pattern instructions, the pattern pieces. I've cut out that little triangle nub and I'm going to put that into that spot. And I'm going to draw my triangles on either end. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut between there and there with a rotary knife. If you don't have a rotary knife, another option you can do is draw that line to make it a bit easier for you as well. There we go. Okay, so if you don't have a rotary knife, so you can't just cut straight along that line, what you can do is get a seam ripper to rip a little hole and then continue with your scissors all through there. Otherwise, another way that could work is fold it in half right on the center. This is a bit dangerous, so just be very wary when you do this. Cut it a little bit so that now you have an opening, and then continue the cut with your scissors. But if you have a rotary knife, I can't use a ruler because I don't want to give away pattern instructions, so I am freehanding it, but straight down that line until the triangles, and then we are going to use scissors to cut the little triangle. Now when we cut the triangle, make sure you don't cut your threads. So just over to that corner, same on this side, just over to that corner. Do not cut your threads. And then what we're now going to do is we are going to turn the pocket back to the other side. So one thing that I find could be quite useful is folding that seam allowance and then folding that in through there. What we're going to do is we are going to pull the zipper pocket piece back through like this, and then we are going to flatten that seam. Now it does help sometimes while you're flattening the seam to just get a clip, match up those center points that are already marked. So this that I'm working with is Vibrant Voo, and one of the things that I absolutely love about Vibrant Voo and Twill is how easy it is to finger press these seam allowances. There we go. So once you're happy with how your pocket looks, we're now going to get our zipper and we're going to insert it in. If you haven't done it already, insert your zipper pull onto your zipper tape. There we go. And singe the ends of the zipper tape. It's just good housekeeping. Now what we're going to do, now you can choose what way you like to open and close your zipper. I like it to close towards that direction and open towards that direction. So I'm going to put it in like this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to have our zipper tape underneath our zipper box, somewhat like this. So the easiest way to do it, if you've not done this before, is to get some double-sided tape. And we are going to put some double-sided tape on either edges of the zipper tape, just along the edge there. And it's easier to do this one at a time, so I'm going to do the top one first. And I'm going to line up my zipper so that it is center point there. And then I am going to stick this down to the double-sided tape, just like that. And then I'm going to make sure my zipper pull is leaning up to the top before I flip underneath. Get rid of that double-sided tape backing. And flip it back down and stick it down. So I'm going to double check, make sure I'm happy with the placement of that, which I am. And then I'm going to take it over to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch all around it. So the long edges, the short edges, back around, all the way around it at a 1/8 seam allowance. So we're at the sewing table now and we're going to top stitch our exterior to our zipper. So just making sure, if you're not sure, take your time. and we'll move your zipper pull out of the way if it gets in your way at all. So this is at a 1/8 seam allowance. I don't like to reverse stitch when I top stitch. So in situations like this, what we then do is we go over to the back. I wonder how well you can see that. There we go. And you pull on the loose thread. It brings up a little loop. You pull that loop through. What that does is that takes the thread from the front, and I'll do that with the starting thread as well. So pull, get that loop, and now I'll have no threads at the front and all my threads at the back, and I'm just going to tie that off. Okay, now that we've sewn the zipper and we're happy with it, we're going to flip it over to the other side, and if we have any excess zipper, we're going to trim that off as well. So we're going to grab our scissors, going to cut that a little bit. Same on this side. And whenever you trim excess zipper, make sure you singe it as well. So that stops your zipper from potentially unraveling. Okay, so that's all singed. And now what we're going to do, I'll flick you over here to give us a little bit more space. Okay, we are going to get our other piece of zipper pocket, so the piece that we haven't drawn the box on, and we are going to line it up with this piece, and we're going to clip it together. If you've watched any of my videos, you know I am a lazy clipper, so I'm just doing a couple of clips just so that I know it's all kind of in place. There we go. I'm also a bit of a messy cutter, so as you can see, my piece isn't exactly the same size, but that's fine. I can deal with it as I sew. So we're going to sew these two pieces together. So obviously you have your exterior fabric there as well, so we don't want to sew your exterior fabric down. So we're going to sew it with the exterior fabric side up, and we're going to move it out of the way as we sew. We are going to do a 5/8 seam allowance for the top and for the bottom, and on the sides we are doing a 3/8 seam allowance. So I like to start up here from the top. So it's a 5/8 seam allowance from the top. So let's swing us back. Okay, as we get to the side, we're now doing a 3/8 seam allowance. Make sure you move your exterior piece out of the way. And then as we get down to the bottom again, we are moving back to a 5/8 seam allowance. And then at the side, we're back to a 3/8. Just making sure you always move your exterior out of the way so your exterior doesn't get caught. And if you didn't start right at the edge, sure, this is at 5/8 again when you get back to the top. Okay. Now that that's all sewn together, we can trim off the excess. So I like to use pinking shears. You don't have to use any, just use scissors if you'd like. And we're just trimming off some of that seam allowance, making sure not to cut your exterior. You're just trimming off, there we go, you're just trimming off the excess seam allowance on the pocket lining. go. So I'll just quickly show you what we've got over here. So on the front, you now have, so this is your back zipper pocket. Your zipper is sewn down. Open it up. There is no opening. This is all sewn together. Close that up. And this is your back. So we've sewn the backing piece on and we've trimmed off all the excess edges. So if you are also doing an internal pocket, you'll now do the internal pocket as well. I'm going to skip that, but I'll show you the finished pocket as well. And just like that, thanks to the power of editing, that's your lining zipper pocket done as well. Done in the same way that you did your exterior zipper pocket. Let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now we are going to attach our stabilizers. So we're going to attach our stabilizer to the front and back panel, as well as to the base gusset panel. If you are using sew-in stabilizer, you can do that a little bit later when you're sewing the lining to the exterior fabrics. But if you're using a fusible one, now's the time to do it. Now's also when you would install your logo tag if you're doing logo tags. I am not, but if you are, Jessie has all the instructions on how to do it as well. So I'm using, like I've said before, Sewfisticated foam. So for me, it's a super easy process, peel, stick, and it's done. But you fuse your stabilizer however you need to. Hey, there we go. So all our pieces are now stabilized and we're going to move on to the zipper. Okay, so we are now up to the zipper panel installation. You may have noticed I've changed fabric again. The reason being, during the testing phase of this pattern, we went through a lot of different ways to install the zipper panel. Your usual way, a slightly different way, trimming seam allowances, not trimming. Anyway, we finally come with what we believe is the perfect way to install a zipper, the zipper gusset, to minimize any kind of wonkiness and to keep that curve integrity, which is obviously super important with this pattern. So let's get on to it. So for this, you will need double-sided tape. I don't use double-sided tape a lot. So normally if I saw this in the instructions, I would probably skip the double-sided tape and just use clips. Do not skimp out on double-sided tape. So this has been tested. The double-sided tape, for some reason, helps it. If you really don't have it, you can still make the bag and it will still work. It's just you have a bit of a higher risk of having a bit more of a bend to it, whereas the double-sided tape helps keep the zipper panel, for some reason, extra firm. So what I have here now is our exterior zipper panel pieces, our lining zipper panel pieces, and my zipper tape, and obviously my zipper pull. So what I'm going to do is I'm working with 1/8 of an inch double-sided tape, just so to really kind of hope to keep it within that seam allowance. So I'm going to put double-sided tape just along the edge here of my zipper tape. Okay, so that's down and beautiful. And then now I'm also going to put double-sided tape on the back. So just on top there. There we go. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put the exterior piece right sides together with the zipper tape, and I'm going to put my lining piece on the back side. So just start getting onto it. I'm going to get the exterior piece and we're going to mark it right sides together with the zipper tape. I'm going to stick it down onto that double-sided tape. Probably tell I really don't use double-sided tape very often. That probably looked super awkward. There you go. Yep, I'm happy with how that's stuck down. And then now we're going to flip it to the back and then we're going to do the lining. So yeah, now we're going to do the lining. So I've just taken that off. And with the lining, we're going to do, so this is the right side, this is the wrong side. We're going to do right side towards the wrong side. If you didn't match up, if you didn't draw out the center points like I did, just make sure you match up your lining and your exterior, because the zipper tape was cut out longer than these two panels. There we go, that's beautiful. I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to take that over to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew that at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Here you go. So that's all done now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it right side out so that, just like that. And I'm going to top stitch that at a 1/8 seam allowance, and then I'm going to base stitch the rest around as well. Now, just in case you didn't use 1/8 seam allowance, not 1/8 seam allowance, sorry, 1/8 double-sided tape, just be careful here, because if your sticky tape is super gunky, you could be gunking up your machine if you used a thicker double-sided tape. So if you start seeing that your thread is nesting or you're having problems sewing, that could be it. So you might just have to get something to really clean up your needle. There we go. Okay, so that's all done, and I'm going to go and do the other side now. I'll bring you guys along. I won't talk, so we'll probably speed through that whole process, but I'll show you guys how it's done. Go. So that's your zipper gusset panel all done. So now you can actually give it a little try and can kind of push it inwards to make that bow. And as you can see, it bows perfectly. There's no waviness. So that's, yep, that's it. Now, I'm just going to do this bit quickly, because if I don't show it now, I'll probably forget to do it myself as well. We're now going to insert the zipper pull. I didn't mention before, but I don't like to insert the zipper pull before we start sewing, because it makes it easier to insert it now after we've sewn both edges, because as you can see, I've got perfect seam allowances on both ends of that zipper tape because I've not had to give way to the zipper pull. If for whatever reason you decide not to insert your zipper pull now, I do give you one last warning later on, but please insert it now. It just makes sense. There's no reason to hold off anymore. Now, next what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off those edges to make it nice and clean, and then I'm going to singe my zipper tape as well. And that's your zipper panel all done. Due to a technical mishap with my phone not filming and saving my video, I'm doing the step for the front assembly now with the Petite. But the steps are exactly the same if you were doing it on the regular size. I'm just showing it on the Petite, that's all. So first of all, one of the first things to do is your zipper direction. Make sure you know which way you want your zipper to open and close. So I like mine closing towards this direction and opening towards this direction. Now, the Petite, it doesn't matter as much because your front and back are essentially the same unless you have a different panel print. But if you were doing the regular, I'll show you my regular. This is this step already done. Make sure that your zipper for the zipper gusset is opening and closing the same direction as your back panel. So that's really important there to bear in mind. Okay, so let's keep going. So first things first, we're going to mark our center points for the front and back panel, as well as for the zipper gusset. Okay, there we go. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work on my front panel, and I'm going to line up my front panel with my zipper panel, center to center. I'm going to mark that, and we're going to match them together. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to then mark the end with the end here. And then we're going to slowly clip all of this in place by moving it along the curve. Now I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to baste that with a 1/8 seam allowance. Okay, so we're at the sewing table, so we're about to baste this with the 1/8 seam allowance. Now, if you struggle with this section at all, with taking the clip off and putting it under, feel free to use a staple and staple it in. I don't like doing it on this first part because we're doing a 1/8 seam allowance. So obviously your seam allowance is already quite small. So if you don't have to, try not to. If you do though, staples are perfect in holding seams together. So that's now all basted together along that curve, and we're going to take it back over to the cutting table, and I'm going to pin the lining on next. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make sure you get your front and back panel, know which one's which. I like to have my label tag on my back, so this one's my front lining panel, and we're going to match the lining panel right sides together with the exterior panel, again matching our center point to center point, and then clipping that on the edge there as well. There we go. And then we're going to take it over to the sewing table, and we're going to sew that with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So come on over. I do find because the lining fabric is a little bit thinner and we're doing a 1/4 inch, I do like to staple these pieces together just before we go under the sewing machine. As you can see, it's right near the edge, so it's definitely within the seam allowance. And then we're doing this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, as we come back up around this section, because we've gone down and now we're coming back up, just be really careful of your exterior fabric that it's not folded under. I'm using a vinyl on this one, vinyl faux leather, so it's easier to do in that way. Sorry, it's not going to fold. But if you're using a canvas or a lighter weight fabric, just make sure you check on it to make sure that there's no folds and that it's just going nice and smoothly and not getting sewn where it's not supposed to. There you go. So if you did staple like I did, make sure you get that staple out before we move on. I should have had my staple remover here, but I do not. Go. Now, before we do anything else, I'll just quickly show you what it looks like right now if I turn it out. So we've got our exterior. Double check that you're happy that it's not been caught anyway where it's not supposed to have been. Yep, that's perfect. I'm happy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to trim my seam allowance. So this allows the bend to bend better, either with pinking shears, or I prefer to just use scissors, to be honest. I'm going to cut on this side. I don't know how well you can see my stitches, the colors there, but I'm going to cut this within my 1/8 seam allowance and roughly 3/8 inches apart. So that 3/8 inches doesn't have to be precise. It's a rough, bring you out a little bit. Yeah, it's just a rough estimate. If you do snip that basting stitch, it's not the end of the world because it is just a basting stitch, yeah? So just the basting stitch there is a great guide to help us know where the 1/8 is, but it doesn't matter if we snip it. Okay, so that's now all snipped and we are happy with that. And we're going to turn that right side out, give it a nice little press. I've said before, this is sophisticated twill that I'm working with on the lining, so I always like to give it a nice little press before I top stitch because it holds its shape really well. So by pressing it nicely before I top stitch, it really helps hold itself. And now we are going to top stitch. So we're going to top stitch this at a 1/8 seam allowance. I'll bring you guys back in a little bit better. Yep. Now I've just gotten to the end here. Now if you were using sew-in stabilizer for your front and back panel, now's the time to insert it. But if you're not and you are using fusible like I am and you've already fused it on, I don't know if you can see it, then what we're going to do is we're going to continue and we're just going to base stitch this all the way around so that your front panel and lining panel are sewn together. There we go. Okay, so that's now all sewn and top stitched. So when we bring this back over, you'll see that our beautiful crescent shape is already starting to form. Okay, yep, so that's your front panel done. I'm just going to go on and do the back now, and yep, we'll move on. Go. And so that is now the front and back top stitched and all done. So let's move on to the next part. Okay, so we've just sewn our panels onto our zipper gusset and we've now fully basted all of that and top stitched. So now if you haven't done it already, this is your last warning. Get your zipper pull on. Now we're going to move on to our D-rings. So I'm using a new product. So I'm using a product that I can insert the D-ring later on. But if you are using a standard D-ring, your D-ring should obviously be inside your D-ring tab, not loose like this. What we're going to do first is we're going to mark the center point of the D-ring tab. And then we're going to mark 3/8 of an inch down from that edge. And I'm going to line up my D-ring tab, the center point to the center of my zipper. And then I'm going to have that 3/8 as an overhang. So it's just going to hang out like that. Clip that on, and same on the other side. And then I'm going to base stitch that on at the sewing machine. There we go. So that is, pretend there's D-rings here. That is our D-ring tabs now basted on. And we're going to move on to the next step, which is final assembly. Okay, come on back over to the cutting table. So now we're going to move on to the base gusset. So we are actually on the final stretch now. So what we're going to do, this part's really important. We're going to get a ruler and we're going to mark 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter in from the edge on this long side, on the short edge, and we're going to draw that marking down onto the back side of your exterior base gusset piece. So I'm just doing that on both ends. There we go. And what we're going to do now is we're going to match center point of your base gusset to the center point of your zipper gusset, right sides together. So if you haven't marked your center points, mark that quickly. Remembering that D-ring is an overhang, so that still hangs out. And I'm just going to mark that up. Go. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sew at a 1/4 inch seam allowance the exterior base gusset to the rest of the bag. 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we're only going to sew in between those two lines. So not the outside, just from that line to that line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're doing that on both sides. Sorry, you might see my head duck in under the camera just so I can really make sure that I am starting out on that line. We definitely don't want to be within that 3/8 seam allowance. So we just want to make sure, double sure, triple sure, that we are not in there. Go. There we go. So as you can see, it is perfectly within that section there, and there's no stitching at all here on the sides. And now we're going to get our lining piece and we're going to attach that as well. I'll just swivel you over here so there's no point going to the cutting table, and show you how to do it over on this side. So we get our lining piece. We're going to line up our lining piece with our exterior gusset piece as well. Just going to line that up, clip it. So if you want to sew, so this is, sorry, right sides together, did I mention that? So this is the right side against that right side of the lining of that side. Now I like to sew it the same way that we sewed that first one, so from the exterior facing up like this. If you like to sew it from the lining side up, then just make sure you also bring your 3/8 marker lines over here. But because I'm sewing this way, I don't have to, because obviously my lines are here on the exterior. And we're going to now sew this together with a 3/8 seam allowance. Making sure again that we're not sewing outside of those two lines that we marked. Here we go. You may have seen I've left really long threads. That is so that I can tie off. but that's that there. So as you can see, if I bring that in closer, we've only sewn in there and the sides are still free, and it's the same on the lining side as well. So now that I've just cleaned up all this, all my loose threads there, we're going to turn the base gussets around so that they are wrong sides facing together. And what I'm going to do next is I am going to top stitch, and I'm going to top stitch my base gusset that I've just done here. So I'm just spinning it all over the place. So I'm just going to top stitch this, and I'm going to top stitch it with the 3/8 remaining, like open, as I did when I stitched it. I found I don't need to remark it. I found I can see my stitching, and so I just top stitch pretty much on top of where I stitched before, and that's with a 1/8 seam allowance. So I'll swing you back across to the sewing machine. So with this part, I find, for me anyway, the easiest way is to have my gusset up above me like this. So it probably doesn't help very much with the filming, but I kind of have this top up like that. Actually, let me show you this quickly. So it's sitting like this. And then what I then do is, as I come in under, I'm then able to just stitch right on. Oh, I'm on the wrong side. Yep. I'm then able to just kind of stitch over it right there. And I don't have anything caught underneath, obviously, apart from my base gusset lining piece. It doesn't make the best filming because I don't know how well you can see this. And I'm going to try my best to let you guys in. And remembering that we are leaving an opening on the side. So I'm not starting right from the side. I'm starting from roughly 3/8 in from the edge. You can mark it if you have a vinyl or whatever material you're working, heat disappearing ink pen. I don't mark it. I know where my stitching is, and I just look out for my stitching. And that's what I've done there. I am once again going to leave tails so that I can tie it off underneath. Good. And then now I'm going to do the other side. So I'm just going to flip it around like this. Pull that out. Oh, this side's easier to see. There we go. So right now my gusset is underneath the sewing machine over on that side because I've just kind of spun it around. So just make sure that I'm not. And 3/8, which is right there is where my stitching started. And again, I am top stitching this side. There we go. Good. So now we should have, I'll tidy up the stitches off camera, but we should have a top stitch section right here, and there should still be a 3/8 gap on either side. And now this is optional to do a rivet on the center here. So if you are going to do a rivet, we're going to go 3/8 down from this edge here, right along the center, and we're going to punch through and make sure you catch your D-ring as well so that it holds your D-ring down. So it's giving you more strength for your D-ring. I'm going to do that quickly as well, but I'll take you over to my cutting table. Back to my original make, the regular one. So here we are at the point where, loose thread, where we have installed the base gussets, and we've installed our rivets now as well on either side to hold our D-rings. And what we're going to do now is we are going to baste the rest of the lining to the base gusset. So you can clip it if you'd like. I tend to not clip when I'm basting this, and I just sew it with the 1/8 seam allowance. I like to sew it with the lining side up and bring it as I sew. So I will take you over to the sewing machine now and we will get on to that. So I'm just going to slowly shuffle underneath the sewing machine now, and we are basting the base gusset lining to the exterior base gusset. So we're basting, so this is a 1/8 seam allowance. Then the other side. Okay. There we go. So that's all basted together. So we'll go back over to the cutting table and I'll show you the next step. Hey, so we've now got our base gusset all basted together and all of our pieces are all here together. So now we're actually going to do the final bit. Now this bit, some testers did find a little bit tricky, so just work slowly with it. What we're going to do first of all is we're going to, it doesn't matter which side you do first, I'm going to do the front. I like to do the front first. I don't know why, I just do. But we're going to line the front panel with the base gusset and we're going to do it right sides together. We're going to match center point to center point. We're going to clip it. And then we're then going to match the edges. Now this is where I think some people struggle with. So what we're going to do, I'm hoping that this is close enough. Yeah, we can see well. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to pull these pieces out right so that your, I don't know if you can see how well you saw that. So this is how, I'll bring it in closer. Okay, so our piece is like this right now, right? So this is my base gusset exterior, my base gusset lining, and this is my front panel. So my front panel at the moment is sandwiched in between my base gusset exterior and my base gusset lining. I'm going to pull that panel out so that my base gusset pieces are lining to exterior together. And then my panel is then on the outside. So we now have base gusset lining, base gusset exterior, and then our actual front panel. And we're going to clip that. Now what I've found easiest for me is actually to then staple that section because I really don't want it to move. And this is a pressure point right there. So I just like to staple it within the seam allowance right there. And then what we're going to do is do the same on this side. So I'm going to show this again so you don't have to rewind. So we're pulling the panel out from in between the lining piece. And then we're matching it. Panel, base gusset, exterior, and base gusset lining. There we go. And now we're going to continue and clip the rest of this front panel and base gusset together. Now, if you choose to, you can staple this whole section together. I don't do that because I am, to be honest, I am too lazy to pull all the staples out afterwards. But if you are unsure or your fabric is extra slippery, stapling it is really helpful in terms of making things stay together. But if you are going to staple, and this is something I learnt quite early on, if you are going to staple, clip before you staple, just in case there is some wiggle room in your fabric to wiggle it so that you're not stapled to the wrong spot, if that makes sense. So if I were to staple, this is now where I would go in and staple all those spots. There we go. So this is all clipped together now, right sides together, base gusset to your panel. So I'm going to sew that together. So you can either sew it together with a 1/8 basting stitch first, or you can go straight in with your 1/4 inch seam allowance and stitch that straight away. So I'll take you over to the sewing machine and we'll start sewing that. I'm over at the sewing machine now. So I find it, for me, easiest to sew it with, oh, I need to move you. So with this side up, so the front panel facing up and the gusset piece on top. A few of the testers actually did it the other way. So they sewed it this way and it worked really well. But for me, I seem to prefer it this way. Jassy has a tip. So if for whatever reason you can't get in here nicely on a 1/4 inch seam allowance, you are able to start lower down and sew lower down first before coming back up to the top. I've actually found not to have any problems starting from the top when I staple. So it's one of the reasons why I like to staple it. Just gives me that little bit of extra hold that I need. And then I'm just going to start stitching it. Now, whenever I do curves, I like to get my pokey stick just to kind of hold things in place. So you'll see me do that a fair bit with this. Just see, like, as soon as I unclip that, this comes away. So I just grab my pokey, help move it back into place. If you did staple like I did, just make sure that you don't run over your staple and break a needle. Hopefully I've not sped this up too much that you can't see, but I'm using this pokey to pull things in, and I'm using this hand to pull for my curves that need to come back inwards. So I'm constantly adjusting. If you'd use staples or through your seam allowance, you probably wouldn't have to adjust as much as I do with clips. But like I said before, I'm lazy. Whoops, almost flipped that up. Okay, so that's all done. I'm swinging you over to this side just to go through the next steps. So I'm just taking all the staples out if you used staples. Now the next step would be to do the other side, but I actually prefer to bind before I do the other side, just because it makes at least binding one side a little bit easier. If you have a stapler remover, use that. Don't use your fingernails and ruin them like me. Okay, so I've unrolled the staples. Now, patterns always say to do this, and normally I don't, but with this pattern, I do. So what I'm talking about is to double check. So the reason being is, I know when we were clipping it, I put a lot of emphasis on this corner and this corner. A few testers, when they didn't check properly, did notice that they didn't catch. So you want to make sure and go in and check. Turn it inside out, if you will, and check especially that top corner that you've caught, which I have, and that you're happy with the rest of your curves. So, yep, I'm happy with that. That all looks beautiful. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to flip it back right, and I'm going to go in and bind that seam that I've just done. Now, before you bind, if you'd like, you can trim off if any of your fabric has excesses. Feel free to trim that off to give yourself a cleaner, easier binding spot. I think that's it. I just had that one little section. Perfect. And I use fold over elastic to bind. I think I've said this before in the past. I have a whole video on how to use fold over elastic if you'd like to watch it. But otherwise, I'm just going to start binding now. Okay, so I'm going to start getting ready for binding. So I'm going to bind the same way I did sewing this gusset. So the base gusset on top. And what I like to do I'm not good with clips. I don't know if you guys all saw that. So I don't like to clip my fold over elastic on. I tend to maneuver it as I go. So what I'm going to do to keep it from moving as I put it in place, I'm going to flip over to the bottom, because your bottom is always your pressure point. That's where your fold over elastic might fall off. I'm going to put a little bit of double-sided tape on that top end where I'm starting. Doesn't matter how much, it's just enough to catch your fold over elastic. I need this closer to me because I can't see. This is a 1/8 inch wide double-sided tape, in case you wanted to know. Okay, and then what I'm going to do, so I've got my double-sided tape there. I'm going to fold my fold over elastic in half where that fold is, and I'm going to match up my seam, and I'm going to stick this one down. Now for this, I like to leave, I don't know how much that is, 1/4 inch. I just like to leave a bit extra before I bring it up. So like I've got an overhang at the top there. The reason being is so when I sew it, I can cover up that top corner with it. So I'm going to bring this in. We're going to sew our binding on with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, whatever binding choice you use. As I said plenty of times, I am using fold over elastic. And I forgot to click you over to the, I've only just started, so it's okay, you haven't missed anything. I've just done my reverse stitching. And then as I do, watch my bigger video with more tips and tricks on fold over elastic if you wanted to do this, but I'm just pulling it as I go and covering my seam. And we're doing a 1/4 inch seam allowance here. Flip you over here. So that's all bound now. Ooh, almost pulled my whole tripod down. That's all bound now on this side. So we'll flip over to the underside, double check that we are happy with all the binding, which I am. So what I'm going to do now is finish off the start and finish. So obviously, like I said before, I don't clip this in place, so I obviously have overhang. So we'll cut that off. I don't cut it right next to it. I cut it off a little bit further up. Just a tiny bit. What you'll see here, so this is how my fold over elastic has ended. Now, what we're going to do now is just grab a lighter. If I stop talking and breathing onto it, here we go. Grab a lighter and we're going to singe it. And I'm just going to hold it a little bit. Be careful, it's obviously hot. And what that does is, because fold over elastic's synthetic, it seals it shut. So that's now all sealed shut. And I'm going to do that at the start end as well. Oh, the light is in the way. There we go. That's also sealed shut. And now we're going to do the other side. So I'm going to go back over to the cutting table and clip it all in place. And I'm probably going to fast forward through most of it because you've seen me do the other side. It's exactly the same. Okay, there we go. So she is all done. Double checking that I like my binding all the way through. I'm pretty sure I was looking at it as I was going and it's pretty perfect. Am I allowed to say that about my own work? I don't know. I think I should be allowed to. Yep, I'm really happy with that. So I'll flip her over and we're all done. So this is the last stage, is the birthing stage. Now that we're binded everything, I'm just getting a couple of these loose ends while I've got the bag over on this side. Here's a little tip too. If you like to take photos of your makes, I like to take the inside shots before I birth it. Anywho, actually, yep, let's just birth her. Let's do it. There we go. And I just need to give her a good little press and then I'm pretty happy with her. She's all done. We just need to do the strap. But yeah, that's our Luna regular. Thank you so much for joining me on sewing art tutorials. So this is what we've ended up making. This is my mini that I sewed with you guys, and this is my regular. So that's our Luna by Sewfisticated Craft Designs. Thank you so much for joining me. If you like what I've done, please subscribe. I have a few more other videos with tips and hints. But yep, otherwise it's been so much fun sewing with you guys. I'm Sam from Made by Ireland. See you next time.